Hi, I'm Nora Neill, and I teach English at Grand Rapids Community College, and today I'm speaking with author Susan Cain, who wrote Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And Susan, obviously your book is about introverts and their place in this world, and I'm wondering how you discovered that you're an introvert.
Oh, wow. You know, I think I discovered it probably when I was about 4 years old. And of course, when I was 4, I didn't have a language for it. So I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm an introvert. But I was really aware from a very early age of the ways that my preferences for how I wanted to spend my time were different from the way things were organized for kids. You know, so I remember being in camp and really wanting to play one-on-one with like one kid at a time, and you could do that some of the time, but much more often everybody was kind of herded into these big merry groups, and you had to all sing songs together. And I just remember feeling kind of baffled by it, as to why we were supposed to spend our time that way.
So did you feel discouraged or like you were held back from being yourself because of these social norms?
Yeah, I think in some ways I did. You know, it's funny, I can't even remember thinking about it consciously. It was more just something I was sort of puzzling over in the background, as I was growing up. And then when I became older, this became a much more conscious thing for me. So, you know, in high school, I think I was really aware of it. I think that's probably the time of life that's hardest for most introverts, because that's really the time where the only social currency there is how gregarious and vivacious you are. You know, later on, when you get older, I think there are a lot of different forms of social currency, like by the time you go to college. But yeah, I remember feeling uncomfortable during later adolescence. And then as an adult, I still had these preconceptions. So I was actually a Wall Street lawyer in my old life. And before I started practicing as a lawyer, I had this idea that because I was more quiet and reflective, that I might be at a disadvantage. You know, I thought that the ideal lawyer had to be very bold and very take charge, and I knew I wasn't like that. And then I got to my law firm and I realized that most of my fellow lawyers, not most, but let's say many of my fellow lawyers were also more introverted, and a lot of them were great at what they did by virtue of this whole constellation of traits that we usually undervalue. You know, they were careful, they were quiet, they would think before they acted. All these things that in our culture are seen as sort of second-class traits. But they're actually incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think that it's so important to identify as an introvert, or to understand that personality trait, or for that matter to figure out what it means to be an extrovert? What value do those labels hold?
Well, I've truly come to believe that these labels or these identities are as fundamental to who we are as our gender. I believe they shape the way that we love, they shape the kind of work that we like to do, they shape the way that we make our way through our daily lives. So the more understanding you have about yourself and the more acceptance you have of who you are, the more powerful you can be, and you know, the more agency you have in your life, just as it is with gender.
Right. So there's kind of this idea that you present that there's a spectrum between introvert and extrovert, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around what exactly that means, that there's a spectrum, and can people have traits from both? And I know that there's such a thing as an ambivert,
Right, right.
But what does it mean that it's on a spectrum, and how does that help us with this idea of identity and understanding ourselves,
Right.
And that essential piece of our lives?
Yeah, and these are great questions because it is incredibly confusing. And the reason it's confusing is, you know, at the end of the day, we're all individuals, and as individuals, we're all, you know, a big, complex, glorious mishmash. So even if you really do feel like you're on one end of the spectrum, introvert or extrovert, you're still going to have some of the other aspects in you. And then, as you said, there are ambiverts who really kind of feel like they're smack in the middle of the spectrum. But I guess, you know, I'm going to return to gender again. I think it's a good way of understanding it. Just as you might say there are some people who are really very feminine, or some people who are really very masculine, and that will tell you a lot about who they are and tell themselves a lot about who they are. Still, you know, even the most feminine person has aspects of the male in her, and vice versa. And so I just offer that by way of analogy. These things are never totally fixed, and yet they're incredibly illuminating.
So as you went on this journey of research to discover things about what it means to be an introvert in this world, what were some surprising things that you learned, things that you uncovered that you maybe never thought were there?
Well, one thing was something I kind of had a hunch about, but I didn't know if there would be any research out on it. And that is that in some circumstances, introverts make better leaders than extroverts do. And I know that sounds really counterintuitive, because when we think of leadership, we think of somebody who almost by definition, we assume it's somebody who wants to be in the spotlight and somebody who wants to take charge and be around people, almost by definition. But it's really not always like that. And there's a number of interesting studies on this. One of them by the organizational management professor Adam Grant at Wharton. He did a study and he found that introverted leaders deliver better outcomes than extroverts do when they're managing employees who are very proactive. So, if you're managing somebody who has a lot of ideas and a lot of gumption, they do better with introverts who are more likely to let them run with their ideas and be interested in bringing those ideas to the surface. Whereas extroverts, by their nature, are more likely to be putting their own stamp on things, and there may just not be as much time to hear other people's ideas. But on the other hand, extroverts do better when employees need kind of a lot of rousing and a lot of inspiring, then an extroverted skill set is better. So it's just to say, as with all things, there's no one right way to be. It's just that there are different conditions in which different ways of being are useful.
So this idea of leadership and sort of maybe stepping back and let others take some charge of the situation.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from, or how do you think that connects to being an introvert?
Well, it's funny. One of the things we know, and again, this is something, when I say it, you'll probably feel like you know it by instinct, but there are always studies confirming what we know by instinct. So introverts are really good sort of askers of questions, posers of questions. And this probably, for many of them, originates as wanting to deflect the attention from themselves. And so it's a social skill that they learn over time. Like they learn to draw other people out really well. And that becomes a way of being in the world. And so when, going back to leadership for a second, when you think of them as leaders, they're accustomed already, they're primed for being in that mode of like, what can I draw out of somebody else? Which is an incredibly useful trait across the board. And, and it's not just leadership. You look at like another conventionally extroverted domain you would think is sales, but introverts often make good salespeople, because there's a maxim in sales that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that proportion. And again, many introverts figure out how to draw on those natural strengths and really do well.
As you have done this work and you continue to talk about it, what misconceptions about introverts are you hoping to dispel? What are you hoping to change in particular?
Yeah, there are so many. I mean, really, probably the biggest or maybe the most fundamental is the idea that introverts are somehow asocial or antisocial, that these are people who don't really like people. And it is not it at all. That's such a misunderstanding. So introverts, they're just as warm or caring as anybody else. It's just that they like to function in environments that are less stimulating. So they'd rather lavish their social energies, on one person who they know well, or on their close friends as opposed to a wider circle of friends. Like they'd rather have the glass of wine with a close friend as opposed to going out to a party, because that's a less stimulating way of interacting and of connecting. But it's funny, people sometimes when they meet me, they'll be like, oh, I'm surprised you seem friendly, as if being an introvert you couldn't also be friendly. And yeah, I think that's a real misconception of what it is.
So why are these misconceptions not a good thing? I mean, what does it have to offer by shifting people's perspectives and changing the way they look at this one particular piece of our identity?
Well, I mean, it's really twofold. So on the one hand, it just it gives individual introverts a much needed sense of validation and permission to be who they are. And I get hundreds, really thousands of letters from people telling me about their reaction to the book, and that's the primary thing that I hear. Finally, for the first time, I feel like it's okay to be who I am. The way I want to spend my time is okay. I can spend it that way. I don't have to always be forcing myself to do something different. So that's the individual level, but on a societal level, it's actually bigger than that, because as a culture, we want to be educating kids so that they're going to learn a lot and thrive and grow up to be thriving adults. As employers, we want to set up offices where people are actually feeling energized and engaged. And right now, we're not actually doing that. We have set up our schools and our workplaces primarily for extroverts. But we will all benefit when we're setting them up for both types.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about this idea of energy a little bit?
Yeah.
So that's the way I tend to think of the two categories. So could you talk about what it means to feed our energies off of different environments?
Yeah, so that is one of the classic ways of understanding the difference between these two types, and it is that introverts draw energy from being by themselves or from being with people who they know well, being kind of in quieter situations, and extroverts start to feel like they crave much more coming at them. When they're not getting enough of it, they start feeling a lack of energy, so they need more coming at them for them to feel at their most energized. And so this is why, as an introvert, you might go to a party, let's say, and maybe you're having a really good time. But many introverts experience this moment where after an hour or 2 hours, they kind of hit the wall. And a minute ago, they were having a good time. And then when they're beyond the wall, it's like they can't wait to go home. And it's not a lack of caring for the people around them. It's just that it's like their battery has been drained out, and now they have to go recharge their energy somewhere else.
So again, as you went on this research journey, I'm wondering what you learned about yourself. Lots of the things that you're saying right now I can identify with and totally understand when you talk about the wall. I imagine myself in that situation. And reading your book, I learned a lot about myself, and I felt it to be a very introspective experience. So as you went through this process, this long process of writing this book, what did you discover about yourself in terms of introversion?
Well, I guess one thing was, I think writing the book, and especially being out and publicizing it, has really given me a deep sense of self-acceptance, because I noticed during the years when I was researching the book, but it hadn't come out yet, I would go, let's say, to a dinner party and talk to people about what I was writing, and it always felt weird to me because the word introvert in our culture is stigmatized. So it felt strange for me to kind of announce myself as an introvert and say that this is what I was focusing on. It was like I was taking the stigma on myself. But now I've gotten beyond that. I guess I could say I really feel like the word has been reclaimed for me personally. So I have a deep sense of comfort with it.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that the book offers more broadly to people, because when I say something like, well, do you think you're an introvert? People will often think like I'm saying something offensive to them until I explain more about what I'm talking about, and then they think, oh, maybe, and so then it takes some of that stigma off.
Exactly. It used to be kind of exactly what you're describing, but now I sometimes go to audiences and everybody's saying, oh, I'm an introvert too, even though I think some of them really aren't, but it's become a word that now people want to own.
Oh, that's
so
funny.
That was when I started observing that, I was like, now I know I've done my job.
I think that you've talked about this some, and you made it really clear that this is personally valuable to you and you see problems in our culture. But I'm wondering if you can talk about this idea of why you're passionate about this topic. And one thing I liked a lot that you said in your book was that introverts tend to really need to do something that they're passionate about. And so I'm wondering if you can maybe make that link and talk about why this is something that you believe in so wholeheartedly.
Well, I just think as a society, we are making such a mistake to set things up the way that we are. I think it's a colossal waste of talent and of energy and of happiness. I mean, schools, you go into schools nowadays, and I as part of my book research, I traveled to public and private schools around the country, and I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just thought, I just want to see what life is like for kids nowadays. I'm almost 45, so I hadn't been in a classroom in a long time, and I was shocked to see how things have changed. Nowadays, you walk into a classroom and it's like all group learning all day long. The kids are sitting in what they call pods of desks pushed together. They're doing one group exercise after another. I think that's not the right way to learn for a lot of kids. I don't even think it's great for extroverted children either, for reasons I can talk about. But it's certainly draining and annoying for a lot of introverted kids to be asked to learn that way. And that is their experience of education. It drives me crazy. I've talked to kids. I was just talking to a young woman recently who told me she really wants to go back to graduate school, but she said, I cannot take the group work anymore, so I'm not going to go. And I understood that, because I loved school, but if I had been coming up now and had to learn that way, I don't think I would have.
Yeah, I'm a teacher, and in my classroom, as I was reading your book and teaching, I thought, I use so much group work in my classroom, and I am exhausted by the time it's over with. And so it really gave me permission to say it's okay to have these quiet times where we're spending longer time writing, and organize it so that there are breaks throughout the session that I'm in. And
yeah. But I really want to emphasize, it's not like the only reason to do this is just, give the poor introverts a break. I mean, it's also, people actually think better. They think more deeply. They think more reflectively when they have time to sit and process by themselves. This is true for extroverts also. We know there's all this research on brainstorming, and it has found that individuals who brainstorm by themselves, you sit in a room and generate ideas, you produce more ideas and better ideas than if you're brainstorming with a group of people. And yet there's this kind of sacred cow now in education that says, all great education comes from this group engagement. I don't buy it.
Yes, but and I agree with you, even if I watch my students and they write before then they have to talk, then having those moments of reflection before they engage, the conversation is much richer, just giving them those moments to reflect individually, no matter what their identity is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's really what I advocate, actually. And when I talk to businesses too, I advocate for a kind of hybrid process where people are sent off by themselves, and part of the social expectation is that you're going to, before any meeting, you're going to go off by yourself and actually prepare for the meeting by doing deep thought. And then you come and you share what you've learned. I think it's much more effective.
So speaking of moments of quiet, how do you create moments of quiet in your own life? I mean, you're now very busy, you probably were before. So how do you make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the grand irony of what I'm doing now, because my book came out, I guess now about 14 months ago, and I've just been on the road ever since, out there talking about it. So, one thing is, it really helps to be, if you're going to be out there, it helps to be out there about something you're passionate about. And you were alluding to this before, but I really care and I really like talking about it, and I meet other people who care, and so that's all great. And then the other thing, because of this newfound sense of entitlement that I have to be who I am, I don't really hesitate to ask for breaks and downtime that I need. So I try not to, ricochet from cocktail party to lecture to book signing to this. I like to schedule in breaks because I know I'm going to be able to give the people around me much more if I get those moments.
And it just shows that you're doing what you advocate for.
Yeah.
What advice might you give to young introverts who are growing up in a system where it might not feel totally comfortable for them, and they're in environments that maybe don't support how they do their best? What would you say to them to do to maybe change it, or to just survive it, I guess, or do more than survive it?
Right. I mean, so many things. So number one is kind of what we were just talking about, to figure out how to build in the breaks that you need. And if that means going out and taking a walk by yourself, or whatever, just figure out. In the book I talk about a professor named Brian Little who talks about the need for restorative niches, which are the little things you do and places you go to return to your normal self. So, grant those to yourself. Another thing, just as we were saying before, to really find the thing you're passionate about doing, because you can do all kinds of things in the service of your passions. And then a third thing is to really figure out how to draw on your own natural strengths. So like in the book I talk about how when I was a Wall Street lawyer, I actually became good at negotiating, and I used to think I would make a lousy negotiator because I assumed that a good negotiator was the kind of person who could kind of hold forth in a loud voice and pound the table and this kind of thing. And then I realized that's not right at all, and there's this other mode of doing it, where you're really civil and you're really well prepared, and you ask the person questions and you try constructively and in good faith to come up with a deal that works for both of you. Basically, there's a lot of modes of doing the same thing, whether it's being a leader or a salesperson or a negotiator. So figure out the mode that works for you.
So I'm wondering, as you look ahead and you've started this platform for change, what do you hope to see? What would be a vision for going forward in our culture for change?
So many things. As you can probably tell, I would love to start with education. I'd really like to see some kind of widespread training of teachers in the difference between introverted and extroverted temperaments, so that, because I think too often introverted children are seen as needing to be kind of helped along the path to extroversion, as opposed to cultivated for who they are, you know, and figuring out ways to do best in their own natural skins. So education is one, and you know, again, I'm going to come back to the women's movement here. Like, I think the kind of widespread change that we need and that I'm talking about, I think it's the kind of thing that has to be done on a grassroots level by lots and lots of different people. And that's what I'm starting to see now. You know, you search this stuff on the internet, there are now so many people writing about this and advocating for it in their workplaces, in their schools, in their religious institutions. So I think that's what we need. We need like a massive consciousness raising, and it's starting.
In my daily life, in my day-to-day life, what changes could I make, or what changes could a person make to try and shift this culturally?
You know, I think it's a matter of looking at what is the corner of the world in which you hold any influence. You know, and it might be the raising of a child, it might be teaching a class, it might be, are you a manager in an office, where you could think about how you might want to design office space differently or run meetings differently. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of, as with anything else, kind of looking around your world and seeing what changes you can make. But I hear stories all the time from parents. And sometimes they're introverted parents and sometimes extroverts. There's one, I wrote about her in my book. She is a super extroverted mom, and her daughter's an introvert. And she talks about how, you know, her daughter had lots of friends, but she would pick her up from school at the end of the day and find all the girls kind of gathered around chatting and gossiping, and her daughter would be off by herself shooting baskets by herself. And she said she had to stop doing school pickup because it pained her so much to see her daughter alone like that. But as she came to understand her better and know that all she was really doing was just recharging her batteries, you know, and getting the time she needed, she started really rethinking her parenting, you know, and scheduling and breaks for her daughter instead of going from school to play dates to activities. So, you know, these shifts of consciousness have a lot of concrete effects as well.
So you mentioned that there's an extroverted parent with an introverted child. Do you think that a person is born an introvert or an extrovert, or do you think that that's something that develops over time?
So in the case of any one individual person, you can't say, because, you know, it could be environment, it could be nature. But talking as a group, yeah, introversion and extroversion are among the most heritable of all personality traits. So it's actually possible to observe them even within days of birth. It's kind of amazing. But if you think of introversion as being kind of more responsiveness to stimulation, and extroverts as, it just takes them, they don't feel stimulation as much. They're more immune to it. So when babies are days old, if you give them sugar water to suck on, the introverted or the babies who are likely to grow up to be introverts will suck more vigorously on the sugar water than the extroverted babies will, because the introverted babies are reacting to the stimulation of the sugar water. I mean, so it's amazing. You know, those same babies, when they're 2 years old and you put them in a play group full of kids they've never met before, they're the ones who will kind of stand silently and observe and check out what's going on before they plunge in, because that is an inherently stimulating situation and they want to check it out. Whereas an extroverted child just doesn't feel it as much. That stimulating event is not, it's just not as momentous for them. It doesn't register in the same way, so they just go plunging right in.
So for a lot of people, the relationships in our lives are very important.
Yeah.
And obviously people have different personalities. So how do two people in a close, intimate relationship, partnership, or friendship work together as extroverts and introverts to have a strong bond?
You know, I think the answer is really well. I actually have a whole chapter in my book on introvert-extrovert relationships, because it's so important. And we actually know from management research, teams that are made up of introverts and extroverts do the best. And a lot of marriages are introvert-extrovert or couplings, which is not surprising when you think about it, right? Because there's this kind of opposites attract, each person feeling that the other complements them. But, you know, of course there are conflicts that tend to come up again and again. So at work, like the big conflict that I hear about is extroverts can feel sort of understandably baffled and this comes up in classes too, as to why the introverts wouldn't be participating. You're like, I know this person is full of ideas and really bright, so why won't they share them with everybody else? And the introverts are feeling like, ooh, by the time I think of the thing that I wanted to say, the class is over, the meeting is over. So it can really help to just have this mutual understanding of what's going on. And for the extroverts who want to hear the best of the introverts' brains, perhaps not to ask for that knowledge in a big stimulating group meeting and do it one-on-one, give the person more time to prepare and think through, because introverts don't like to think out loud. They want to think before they process. So, there's so much you could say, but it all comes down to a matter of really understanding what these traits are.
Well, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today, and thank you personally for writing your book and really changing my life.
Oh, thank you, Nora. Yeah. You're so welcome. It was really nice to be here.